Juan, you're live on the air. Go right ahead with your question for Rabbi.
Okay, thank you, Rabbi. This is Juan calling from Colombia. Recently, the JW, these are the J witnesses, in their Watchtower published what they say is what they figured out is the meaning of the prophecy of Daniel 2 on Nebuchadnezzar's dream. What the J witnesses say basically is that the steel in the feet of the giant that Nebuchadnezzar had in his dream are the United States allied with the British government, which is going to be, let's say, thrown out by the rock, and that the rock is Jesus. Well, that's a Christian. I want to know what the Jewish perspective is. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you for your call. Go ahead and hang up now. Do the answer. Thanks.
Nebuchadnezzar had a dream, and Daniel interpreted for him, and the feet of this statue is made of clay and iron that don't naturally adhere to each other. That fourth kingdom is Edom. Edom, unlike its predecessors, Greece, Persia, and Babylon, working our way backward, which are also present in the same statue, changes, morphs. It begins in the Roman Empire, but becomes a part of the Roman Empire and becomes the official religion of the Roman Empire. So whereas Rome was hostile to Christianity, in fact, the emperor of Rome, who was a fairly successful fellow and sort of put Rome back on its feet at the very end of the 3rd century and very early 4th century, when Rome in the 3rd century looked like it was going to collapse. I mean, there were times when emperors were just being assassinated so fast you couldn't keep track of, who was the emperor at any given time. But Diocletian is able to put the empire back on its feet. But Diocletian also saw Christianity as a threat, and it was during his reign that Christians were persecuted, and they were persecuted more in the first, let's say, 10 years of the 4th century than in any time prior. Diocletian eventually recuses himself. So here you have Rome, an enemy of Christianity, immediately prior to Constantine, who is going to, through a series of victories, a very important one in the fall of 312, is going to unite the empire under one emperor and assign his victory to the God of the Christians. He's going to continue to mint coins that celebrated other gods like Sol Invictus, even after his conversion to Christianity. He's going to convene the Council of Nicaea, which would unite what Christians believe about Jesus and unite the church on having a calendar that would be different than the Jews. What's very clear is that unlike the Babylonian Empire, the Persian Empire, and the Greek Empire, which were fairly monolithic, the Roman Empire that morphs into the church couldn't be less monolithic than it was. And in fact, in 410, Rome would be sacked, and by the end of the 5th century, in 476, the empire would be destroyed, would be invaded and shattered by Germanic tribes. Precisely what happened and how did Rome fall is up for debate. If you would have been alive in 470, now we talk about the fall of the Roman Empire, we're talking about the Western Empire. We're not talking about the East. The East would continue for another 1,000 years. But what is very transparent is that there's an enormous amount of change. The church itself would split between the East and the West in 1054. Like the fall of the Roman Empire, it didn't suddenly happen, but there were events leading up to it that one could see this was not going well for a united church. And the church would continue to split and to morph and to change. And in the 16th century, there would be another revolution in the church where the Roman Church would face another enemy from within, from the West, and that's the Reformation that will reject the authority of Rome altogether. I mean, the chief hatred, antipathy that the Protestant movement had in the Reformation was the ecclesiastical authority of Rome itself. So we reject the authority of the Pope. Luther, Calvin, both held that the Pope was the Antichrist. So it continues to morph further, and the Catholic Church recognized that the Protestant movement certainly posed an existential threat to Rome, and they would convene a council, the Council of Trent, which would be by far the longest council of the church to oppose the Reformation. And I think with insight proclaimed that if you want to throw off the Pope, your movement is going to produce 1,000 popes, which sort of came true. You have thousands of Protestant denominations that differ on major issues in the church. That's what the clay and iron is, and that the stone that's thrown, not by a hand of men, is the Mashiach, is the Messiah, is the fifth kingdom, which is going to destroy it all. And Edom is the implacable enemy of God that is utterly destroyed at the end of days, and it cannot be redeemed. And this leads us to the fifth, we don't call it an empire, the fifth kingdom, and that's the kingdom of Mashiach, which in this case, one like a Son of Man comes with clouds of heaven to Hashem, to the Ancient of Days, and takes up his rightful place as an heir to the Davidic throne. And then all the world will recognize that this is a true kingdom. It's the kingdom of Hashem. That's what's happening. It's very transparent what's going on here. And to mix America into this is a very, very big mistake. The United States is the kind of unique democracy, a very well-forged democracy, where America can choose one way or the other. Its separation of powers is really brilliant. So the Americans really have, the republic really have choice with the separate, like in Israel, we don't have a separation of powers, where the executive branch and the legislative branch are all the same, are intertwined. But the United States has that separation, which is very unique, and that the judicial branch would be unique and distinct, and it would be the executive branch that would choose judges, and then the legislative branch would have to affirm, thumbs up or thumbs down on those appointments. It's just brilliant. So America has like this kind of unique freedom and a independent legislative branch, really very independent, which is really quite remarkable. So America really has a choice on which way it's going to go. There's really, I can't think of another country that has that form of government with such a unique, distinct separation. So people really have choices in the United States. Of course, that's an advantage. The disadvantage is that America, a country that I was born in, that I love very much, my parents were both born in the United States. I hope America will make the right choice, but America really has that choice to move in one direction or the other, and it is never more important than it is now. America threw off Britain. It was born out of a crucible of throwing off King George III. But America would never have been able to survive its own independence, would never be able to defeat the British without another power, the French, from saving them. If it wasn't for the French, the 13 colonies would have never succeeded in defeating the British Empire. Never. Without the money, the weapons, the forces that the French were willing to provide, America, the United States, that experiment would have never succeeded. That's how very often countries rely on other countries for their own survival. And then tables are turned. And v'hamei v'nyavin, let the wise understand. So America very much can choose one way or the other. I love America very, very much. Here in Israel, America's loved very, very much. There's a bond and a kinship that Israelis feel with the United States, not because America supplies weapons, just a unique connection. And please God, we'll see the coming of the true Mashiach quickly in our time, and Edom will be utterly destroyed. Thank you for your question. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.
אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נעשה בחפצו כל